by finance. So today we shall be listening into this and seeing how do we prepare our private sector to be known to be to align within agroecology principles, and see how this tool could support donors and other financiers and also the political elites in terms of understanding how the business sector is actually embracing agroecology. I want to call upon our presenter for today, Hans. Hans, can you please take over? Please take us through the program and then take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And good morning to everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. It's a privilege to join this ISFAA dialogue this morning. I'm Hans van Zinkernagle. I am a project officer with the BioVision Foundation. I'm with the policy and advocacy team. And as Nancy just mentioned, we very recently officially launched our BACT tool, the Business Agroecology Criteria Tool. And the program for today is to start with a quick video showing the tool, then a quick overview of the tool, take some questions and some thoughts. Then we'll give a live demonstration of how to use the tool. And after that, we'll have time for more questions and for a dialogue.
Okay, Faith, I request you stop sharing the slide so that we share the video.
Now is the time to rethink how we produce, process, supply, and consume food. But how can we change our business models to fairly and healthily nourish a growing population while conserving natural resources? Substantial evidence shows that agroecology is key to transforming our food systems. It promotes sufficient and healthy food, both produced and consumed, in harmony with people and nature. Stakeholders want to understand how enterprises look when they apply the 13 agroecological principles and to learn to identify them. We now have a tool called Business Agroecology Criteria Tool, BACT, which determines to which degree the operations of an enterprise meet with each of the 13 principles of agroecology. The tool assists investors and donors when it comes to orienting their investments. In addition, enterprises can assess their overall alignment with the agroecological principles and support them in identifying potential for agroecological improvement. The tool generates concrete outputs such as an overall agroecology score, contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, figures on its environmental, economic, and social influence, determines whether an enterprise's operations, activities, or strategy may conflict with agroecology. Explore the tool and assess how agroecological a given enterprise is.
Okay, over to you, Hans. I hope that was audible.
Yes, thank you so much for showing the video, Nancy. I could hear it. I hope everyone else could as well. I will now share my screen. Okay. Nancy, do you confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, I can see the screen here.
Okay, very good. So once again, good morning, everyone. Greetings from Geneva, Switzerland. As we mentioned, now we'll give just a quick overview of the agroecology tool. So we've already gone through the rundown of the session. So we'll start with a PowerPoint presentation just to discuss some of the main points about the tool, why it was created, what it is used for, who it can be used by. And then afterwards, we'll move to questions and to a live demonstration so that everyone can see where to find the tool online, how to download it, and how to fill it in. And just to quickly start us off, I'm speaking to you as a member of the BioVision Foundation. So we've been working on this tool for a long time. For those who are not familiar with the BioVision Foundation, just to give you a very quick introduction to who we are, we're a Swiss-based NGO. And as you can see in the slide banner, we've now been existing for 25 years. And our vision is a world with enough food for all, produced by healthy people in a healthy environment. And in a nutshell, we work in three main areas. We support the development and dissemination of agroecological solutions and innovations to deal with food insecurity and the related crises of biodiversity loss and poverty and climate change. We also support knowledge transfer and work to support the empowerment of local civil society organizations and communities. And we think of ourselves as bridge makers. Through policy dialogue, we try to bring together civil society, politics, and science around the table. And where we work in Switzerland, where we're very committed to implementing the 2030 agenda for Switzerland with a specific focus on agriculture, food systems, and sustainable consumption. We also work in sub-Saharan Africa, where some of our most long-standing projects are, namely in East Africa, where we work to support, develop, and disseminate agroecological methods to improve food security and sustainable resource use. And we also work internationally in some international forums to convince decision makers about agroecology and try to connect actors and promote alliances for sustainable food systems transformation. So that's BioVision at a glance. And in addition to this, we have a recent program called the Investing in Agroecology Business Case. And this program stems out of the realization that improving the policy environment alone is really important, but alone it cannot create the food system transformation that we are seeking. In addition to that, we realize that we need to support food systems actors, and in particular enterprises in food systems, to access finance, to access opportunities. And on the other end, we realize that a lot of sensitization needs to be done for investors and for financiers so they can better understand all of the benefits that agroecology and food systems actors working for agroecology provide to food systems and to society. So we're working to support on both sides the enterprises and also try to bring the investors themselves closer and opening them up to channel more of their investments towards agroecological enterprises. So this is our mission, and this is what brings us here today. We believe in a food systems transformation, and we believe that enterprises are at the center of this transformation. And this will sort of set the scene for how the B Act came to be. And I think there's nothing new on this slide, so I'll just go through it very quickly. But when we speak about agroecological enterprises, we're making a difference from conventional enterprises because these enterprises have their core business aligned with the principles of agroecology. And in practice, what this can mean is that they regenerate instead of degrade natural resources. They contribute to local economies. They promote healthy diets with local, diverse, and nutritious foods. They're key actors in territorial markets, and they're also really important for both social, economic, and as well as environmental sustainability. Now, in the short time that we have been trying to design support for enterprises and also try to convince investors to invest more in agroecological enterprises, we've learned that it's a rather challenging situation for agroecological enterprises out there. Many of them operate in a space that's been termed the missing middle, which means that they are too big to be considered micro enterprises and qualify for microloans, but at the same time too small to also qualify for conventional bank loans. And another major outstanding challenge is that investors still tend to prioritize financial revenue over other benefits, whether that be biodiversity conservation or strengthen ecosystem services or providing employment to rural youth. Those very important benefits that enterprises provide often tend to get overlooked. So it's in this context that we've wanted to help enterprises be valued for all the benefits that they provide to all the different actors within food systems, and to unlock financing opportunities for the really important work and services and products that they provide. And at the same time, we want to make it easier for investors to identify these enterprises, these agroecological enterprises, and to invest in them. And so this is where the B-Act, the Business Agroecology Criteria Tool, comes into play. It's a tool that is designed to assess the degree to which enterprises are aligned with each of the 13 principles of agroecology. And we can see those principles in the diagram to the right, and also to assess how aligned they are with the 3 major operational principles of sustainable food systems, which are strengthening resilience, securing social equity, and improving resource efficiency. So this tool fills the need to be able to not only take into account the financial potential of an enterprise, but also their environmental and social impacts. And the tool also has some results that allow to predict what the sustainable, what the scaling possibilities for that enterprise are in terms of scaling its impact on the food system. And we'll have a bit of a more detailed look at that a little bit later. So who is the B-Act for? As Nancy mentioned in the beginning, it's for several groups of actors. It's for investors and donors to inform their decision-making when selecting enterprises in which they want to invest, but basing those decisions not just, again, on financial return, but basing them also on the environmental and social aspects that are so important within a larger agroecology and food systems framework. So it allows for holistic decision-making. It's also a tool that's useful for enterprises. It can be used for measuring their own performance against the different principles of agroecology, and that can help them identify where there is room for improvement. And the tool is also designed in a way where the results can be used for communications. So it can be really useful to communicate on your alignment with agroecology, how well an enterprise might contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And the tool generates some nice visualizations that can also be used for communications purposes. And lastly, the tool is also a resource for civil society and for policymakers to help them learn about what agroecology in practice and business can look like. And it can also be used to survey enterprises to understand what maybe some capacity gaps are and inform supporting projects or supporting initiatives that they want to provide. So how do you use the tool? It's very simple. We'll go through a demo later, but it's available online. It's a spreadsheet-based tool on Google Sheets. All you have to do is access the tool through a link that we will see. You download a copy of that, and then you can start filling it in. And we'll see in real time exactly what the whole tool looks like, but I just wanted to draw your attention to some of the core parts of it that we'll see again afterwards. So when you fill in the tool, you have what we call the principal questions. So it's a long list of questions, and each principle of agroecology will have a series of questions. As you see here, we have the principle 1, recycling, and then 2, we have the list of questions that follow. Then over on the right-hand side, we have the answer fields. And for each question, you can answer yes, no, or not applicable. Now, not applicable would be used if the question simply isn't relevant to the place in the value chain where the enterprise is situated, or it's just not relevant to the operations of that enterprise. And so then you would just select not relevant. And then you'll also see above the answer fields, we have direct and indirect. These are 2 important concepts that we built into the tool so that it is able to capture the impact of an enterprise on the entire food system, or at least on a broader portion of the food system than just where it stands. So what we mean by direct is that it relates to an activity or an operation that an enterprise performs directly. And when we have indirect, it means that that enterprise doesn't perform it directly, but they can influence other actors within the value chain, maybe upstream, to undertake that activity. And that might be a bit abstract now. So when we move to the demonstration, I can give some concrete examples to illustrate this. In addition to the principal questions, we have what we call the screening questions. And so these are intended to flag whether the operations of an enterprise are potentially in conflict, direct conflict with the principles of agroecology. So you see, for example, here we have introducing GMOs. That would be considered a crossing a red line. Active promotion and use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, that would also then be crossing the red line. Promotes extractive raw material production without local value addition. So these, if an enterprise selects any of these, then there might be some concern and some contradictions with the principles of agroecology. And that can also help an enterprise know where they might want to make some changes if they want it to be more aligned with agroecology. Then we also have a sheet for impact questions. These collect quantitative information on the environmental and social impacts of an enterprise. So you can see here, you would fill in quantitative information about carbon intensity, carbon sequestration, water use, soil health, biodiversity, and these are specific metrics that some impact investors are particularly interested in. And so filling in this information will then allow it to appear in the scorecard that you get at the end of the assessment. Now, as you see, it's optional because not all enterprises have access to this data. It can be quite resource intensive to collect this information, so it is not necessary. But if an enterprise wants to fill it out, then that information can then be available to potential investors. And it also might inspire them to start collecting this information to show their impacts in a bit more of a numerical way. Then once you have filled out all of the questions, you will get back a score. And so the score is expressed in a percentage. And as you see, each of the 13 principles will then be represented in a block. And here we can't see it, but each block will also have a percentage. And so the enterprise will know how they are performing against each of the principles. And so the scores for each of the principles and the overall agroecology score, they're based on the percentage of yes and no responses that were provided in the principal questions. All NA, not applicable responses, will not deduct from points. They will not add to points. They will just not be factored into the score. And same here with the tree diagram. So you'll see afterwards we get percentages for each of these two. Just to note that the size of each principle here represents how much weight it carries based on the number of not applicable responses that were given. So if there's a principle that only received not applicable responses, then it would not appear. And here you get the breakdown. As we see, we have the overall score, agroecology score here. Then you have scores for the 3 different operational principles, social and securing social equity, strengthening resilience, improving resource efficiency. And then for each of the actual principles, we have scores too, and a visualization to the right here that shows it. And as you can see, there's also a factoring in of the number of not applicable responses that were provided. In addition to this, there's also a visualization on how much an enterprise contributes to the different SDGs. This could be interesting for communications purposes, again, especially for certain impact investors that are very focused on the SDGs.
kindly mute. Okay. Kindly mute yourselves. If you're not the one presenting, please mute yourselves. Thank you. Hans, you can continue.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. And as you see, the SDG 9 here is not applicable. So it was determined that the BAC tool couldn't really determine how much an enterprise contributes to it. But for the others, as you see, this is what it looks like. And the tool also provides some additional results. When you fill in the impact questions, you will also get a grade on your potential to make systemic change, a grade on your potential for expanding positive impact. Also suggestions for agroecological improvement based on the 3 principles that had the lowest scores. And then there's all of that information can be captured in 2 different scorecards. There's the entrepreneur scorecard and the financier scorecard. The financier scorecard is the one that will take information from the impact questions. So it takes a little bit more time. It requires more information to fill in, but that provides then the most comprehensive sheet of results that could be interesting and useful for investors. Now, the tool was officially launched recently, but the team has been working on it for quite some time. And we recognize that this is the moment where it makes it into the real world and it will be tried and tested. And we recognize that improvements will be able to be made when it's put in a real setting and used by real enterprises. And I make a point of saying this because we also invite every user of the tool to share with BioVision feedback on how user-friendly it was, on how clear it was, on how relevant the questions are, and any other feedback that you could come up with, so that we can take that on board and possibly in the future, if we want to design a V2 of the tool, we could really benefit from all of that input to make it even better. So it is in a process of continuous improvement, but for now, there's just one version that's available to be available probably for some time. And the tool is a public good. It's free for all to use, and it's modifiable. And what we mean by this is that you can modify the phrasing of the questions, you can make changes to it. There is no copyright on it, so anyone is allowed to make any modifications that they would like, with just maybe one reservation, I would say. Maybe don't try to modify the scoring logic or the formulas that make up the scoring logic, because that might throw off how the tool works. So this is a very general overview, a very top level overview of the tool. It will probably make a lot more sense when we go through the demonstration, but I will end it here for now, and we can take some questions to discuss it before moving on to the demonstration. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hans. We already have some questions or some concerns already flowing through the chat box. But if anyone has a question, feel free to raise up your hand so that we go through that. Hans, what's the maximum time we need to take on the questions before you move to the next session?
I think we can maybe take maybe 5 to 10 minutes of questions.
Cool, thank you. Din Sakaba, your hand is up. Maybe I'm not pronouncing your name well, but go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much, the moderator, and thank you, Hans, also for presenting to us this wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay. So thank you very much to both. And I think that's a wonderful presentation by Hans. I have a very quick questions. You know, there are normally lots of dilemmas between the ecology and the use of fertilizers, and as well as even sometimes the GMOs. I think you have put them in the red line, that GMOs and the fertilizer, of course, you have to qualify which fertilizer is actually on the red line. Because I think you said that you're working in sub-Saharan Africa, and this is the area which is food deficient mainly. And if you have to maximize productivity very quickly, the option we have today is actually to use the chemical fertilizers. That's for sure. Then if we leave this out, how can really it works? This is my first question. Second, if you can really give us an example that you have worked all this process and on which you have also got the good result. It could be from Europe, or it could be even in East Africa or the Sub-Saharan Africa. The third one, I don't know the scope of the work. Now, to be specific to, I'm from Ethiopia, of course. To be specific, in Ethiopia, we have this soil acidity problem, major soil acidity problem. This is soil, we call it soil degradation, because I saw this is one of it. Is this type of business can also really involve in really reclaiming these soil acidities, and at what level? Because these communities will not be able to involve in this. It has to be taken up at the level of the government. And what is the scope in which you can involve with within the country, at what level? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rinsa. Hans, I just want to request that you now keep answering questions, because I think there are a number of concerns raised by Dinsa, and I will only take the remaining 3 hands that are already up to allow us move to the next session. So Hans, could you answer to that question? Then I can move to the next question. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much, Dinsa, for your really good questions. I'll try to answer all of them. Please let me know if I leave anything out. Regarding the first one, about synthetic fertilizers. So we are aware that in so many parts of the world, and in sub-Saharan Africa, that chemical fertilizers are widely used. And the way the tool is designed is not to make any one thing a disqualifying factor simply because it's up to the user to decide what they want to make of the information. So of course, within an agroecological perspective, the use of chemical fertilizers would be discouraged, and you would be encouraged to reduce usage progressively until being able to replace that with other types of organic or other inputs. So if you were to check that in the screening question, it would appear then in the results scorecard, which we'll have a look at afterwards. Now, the results scorecard is to be interpreted by the user, say it's an investor, or say it's a donor, and there's places throughout the entire tool for comments. So you can always justify, or you can always make comments, or you can add additional information to explain the context, and maybe to explain the goals. If you have a goal of reducing chemical fertilizers, that can be mentioned so that the person reading their results can understand this. And to move to your second point about real life examples. So, we have just officially launched the tool very recently, and we haven't yet heard back from users, but we have, my colleagues are working on an enterprise accelerator program in Kenya and Uganda, and they're now in the process of finalizing the selection of the enterprises. And for doing that, they will be using this tool. They'll use it now, and they'll also use it later to measure any improvements that were made on any of the principles. So in maybe, let's say, several months' time, we'll have real life examples that we can speak about. But today it's still quite conceptual. But we hope soon to be able to speak more about how it's been used in real life. And then regarding the point you made about soil degradation and soil acidification being a major problem in Ethiopia, the tool could be used by an enterprise, or by groups of enterprises that want to show that one of their missions is to improve the health of the soil and to reduce acidification, and they want to be recognized for this. And I think this is also one of the beauties of the tool, is that it allows enterprises to be recognized for the positive ecological and social impacts that they are making, and for those to be valued. And we're hoping that increasingly investors will be wanting to invest in these positive ecological and social impacts. So the tool helps communicate and show that is what enterprises are doing, and maybe they could even get support from the government if the government wanted to support those initiatives.
Thank you, Hans. I think that's quite exhausting. Zachary, are you there? Please go ahead and ask your question. Zachary Makanya.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up with Hans later. So I wanted to request that he can send his email either through the chat or myself, but I'll follow up with him because sometimes it's very hard to follow up these things on when he's presenting. But I would like to make follow-ups later.
Bose. Habari ya masiku.
Please,
Ezo bana
kindly,
kubo. Tulikuwa nafanzia kule stage.
Enoch, can you please mute yourself? Kindly, if you are not presenting or you're not asking a question, kindly ensure that you're muted, because we have so many people on the call and we would like to finish in time. So Zachary, just to assure you is that we shall be able to share the tool with you, and also we'll also connect you to Hans for any further conversation about this tool. Can I now ask Emmanuel? Emmanuel, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Hello, my name is Enoch.
Enoch, kindly wait. We have someone else going to ask a question. So kindly mute yourself. Thank you. Emmanuel, please go ahead and ask.
My question.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is about the development of the tool. The other versions of the tools were available online. The Agroecology Criteria Tool was on, I think, a website kind of platform, and it was easier to fill the details online. Now, this particular version, the Criteria Tool, requires one to have a Gmail account. Have you put into consideration the limitations, space limitations that comes with the Gmail account, considering that maybe one may be required to assess more than 100 maybe enterprises?
Emmanuel, you're not very clear, but I think your question is noted that the former agroecology SCT tool was it was easy to work on online, but this one requires to go through a Gmail system. So Hans, I hope you've taken note of that. Let me pick the third question, then get back to you, Hans. Emmanuel, that is okay, because you're having a problem, so we cannot keep on waiting. Dirisa Wakabu, can you ask your question, please?
Thank you so much, Hans, and everyone for the questions. My question goes to the use of the tool in more than one enterprise. I'm trying to adopt the tool for part of my research on the value chain, and it seems to be more interested in the production level of the value chain. I don't know if there is a way it can be adopted beyond just production to other parts of the value chain. The second question is there are cases of overlapping description of the indicators.
Okay.
I think at some point when you look at the definition, there are some overlapping, for example, soil health and biodiversity. Some of the descriptions really seem to be overlapping, and I don't know how user-friendly that will be to some enterprises. And then finally, evidence-based data, how do, especially for investors and funders, how can we address the concept, the problem of evidence-based data, and at some point having false data presentation in some of these tools? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dirisa. I'll allow Hans to respond to those questions and then take a final hand. So Hans, there is a question by Emmanuel around the tool not being easily available online. Someone needs to go through a Google system. And then there is a question by Dirisa that is actually looking at that the tool actually looks more at farm level. It's not looking at the entire value chain, the other side of the value chain. So please go ahead, and kindly, if you're not presenting and you're not talking, please mute yourself. George Gitau, can you get muted? Please mute yourself so that we don't interrupt. Thank you. Over to you, Hans.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Teresa, for the really good questions and observations. Maybe just to Emmanuel's point, it is true. I forgot to mention it during the presentation that you have to have a Gmail account because the master file is on Google Drive. As of now, that is the best way of making publicly available the tool that we have come up with. However, if there are suggestions of other platforms on which it could be uploaded to be made available, we would be very open to considering those too. And then to the question about whether this tool is only for enterprises at the production stage of the value chain, the answer is that it's actually available and it can be used by enterprises at every stage of the value chain, from production to aggregation, trading, processing. Really everything should be able to be captured by the tool. And that's also one of the reasons why we have the direct and indirect questions, which we'll have a closer look at afterwards. But this is to assess not only the impact of what enterprises are doing at a certain stage of the value chain, but also the influence that they have within broader food systems at other stages of the value chain. And then to the question about making sure that it can be used for evidence-based communications, providing robust evidence, it really depends on the user to determine how they want to ensure the accuracy of the answers that they get through the tool. So if an enterprise wants to use it for themselves, then of course they should be very honest and respond to the questions based on to the best of their knowledge and based on the reality of their operations, of what they're doing, so that they can see where there might be room to make some improvements. And then when it comes to investors using the tool, this is something very new. So we'll have to see over time how it can work. But for example, with the accelerator program that I had just mentioned, in this case, it's the business development service provider who's running the accelerator program who is conducting the assessments themselves. So they will have their own people to conduct the assessments, and that's their way of verifying that the information that they're collecting is truthful. And it's up to the user also to request any supporting documents or other means of verification just to make sure that some of the information collected checks out. I hope that responds to all the questions.
Thanks. Can we answer the final question before I read some comments from the chat? Malvan Chikanya, are you there? Can you ask your question and let it be short so that we move to the next session, please?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you very much, Hans, for your presentation. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Malvan, we can hear you.
Thank you. I would like to first appreciate Hans for the presentation. I do like the tool very much, and would like to explore possibilities of maybe working with farmers to be able to test the tool. My question is more on the philosophy and the definition of an enterprise when you are designing the tool. If you look at some of the very small scale farmers and how easy is the parameters that you have defined to be applied on a very small scale farmer in the context where farmers are constantly shifting in terms of their agricultural practices. And the second one, of course, is just the technology adoption, or even how can we transfer the technology in terms of access. And I think this was raised by someone before. It's still available on Google. And this is something that we want to be able to explore and see if there's another way to get it easily available, especially to farmers that may not necessarily be accessing internet or Google. So that's something that we would like to explore, but also just to understand the philosophy behind the targeting or definition of an enterprise.
Thanks, Malvan. Okay, thanks a lot, Malvan. I want to request one person who has been asking a question. Cuthbert, is that the right? I hope I'm getting that name right. Cuthbert, there's a question you are asking about the use of the tool after you used it. Are you there, and are you able to ask Hans the question, because you've written a number of comments about after using the tool? So can we hear from you? Are you there?
Thank you. This is Cuthbert. Can you hear me?
Yes, Cuthbert, we can hear you, though faintly.
Yes. I tried to fill the tool offline, and it appeared to be working.
Yeah.
Except for that one sheet which was having those red flags.
Yeah.
It was not clickable. So if I fill the tool offline, does it actually give positive and right results?
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, Cuthbert. Let me read some comments before I call upon you, Hans, to respond to the questions, and then we go to the next session. I think there's a big appreciation that the tool is a great tool and it gives very good summaries, and it's a positive step towards agroecology assessments. There is a continuous question on if the tool has been used in smallholder farmer system in the African context, and because in Africa, some of the farmers are said to be farming enterprises. So what are the experiences of using this tool? I know you've said it's just being launched, but is it meant to be used at farm levels for farmers? So that's a good question. I just want to assure you that we shall be sharing the tool and the presentation to all people who registered. So I hope all of us have registered, and if you didn't register, please send through your email so that we are able to get all the emails. Faith, also just kindly send a message on how members can join the ISFAA Alliance. There are members who are looking forward to joining, so kindly send any information on that through the chat. So Hans, over to you. I would like you to respond to the questions, but also continue with your presentation from there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you for these really useful observations and for your questions. I think it's really helpful for us as well to recognize where we can make improvements too. Regarding Cuthbert's observation that there were some issues when using it offline, that's entirely true. As of now, the results will only be properly generated if you use it online. And we recognize that this is a limitation, especially if you want to go out into the countryside where you don't always have reliable access to internet and you want to assess different farm enterprises, then this can pose a challenge. So I invite everyone to brainstorm together on this. And if there are ideas of other ways, maybe other platforms through which it could be shared, or if there has been a good experience using Excel spreadsheets instead of Google Sheets spreadsheets. That's another option that we can explore. But I take good note of this clear limitation. So thank you for this. And then to come to the question about our definition of an enterprise here and what is the philosophy behind it. We are using the term enterprise here in a very open way. So we don't mean to exclude any type of smallholder farmer or farm enterprise, or even a collective or a farming group. It's really open to however the user wants to sort of circumscribe their own operations and define themselves as a working entity, as an enterprise. And you'll see when we look through the questions that many questions relate directly to the production level. So it's actually, I think, quite well conceived for assessing production and taking into consideration lots of things such as water use, use of inputs, land use, biodiversity conservation, etc. So a lot of the factors that go into production are captured in the tool. So it can be absolutely used at the farm level. And I think now I'll proceed to give a demonstration, if that's okay, Nancy.
That's
so
okay, Han.
Just give me one moment so I can find my screen here. Okay. Now let me share my screen. Okay. Nancy, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see agroecology info pool.
Sorry. Okay. Good. Let me come back to that. So this is the info pool website. BioVision has created this as a resource website with lots of studies, other resources, and tools. So to access the tool, you go to the website, you hover over tools, and then in the drop-down menu, click on Agroecology Criteria Tool. Business Agroecology Criteria Tool, the BACT. Once you're here, you can download a user guide, which will look like this and provide some more guidance on how to use the tool, how to interpret some of the concepts, and what you can expect to get back. So this is available for further information. And how you use it is you click on Get Started with the BACT. So I click on this here. And then what opens up is the tool. Now, as we mentioned before, in order for you to start using it, you have to make a copy. As of now, this is the master file and it's locked. This is the way that we have decided to make it publicly available and to share it. There's the master file, but the master file cannot be edited. So you have to make a copy. So we'll just write demonstration. You have to make a copy and then the tool is usable. And of course, as was mentioned, the prerequisite here is that you have to have a Gmail account. Hopefully, that won't be a barrier for most people. So I'll just come to this version of the tool here. Here we go. Here we are. So I've already started filling in this one, but it's the same thing. So we can have a look at it together. When you land on the Welcome tab, here you are, and you are directed to then have a look at the Instructions tab, which follows here. In the Instructions tab, we have the objectives of the tool, which we mentioned during the presentation, making it easy for entrepreneurs and financiers to assess an enterprise through the lens of agroecology. That's really the overarching goal of the tool. And then instructions for how to use the tool. It's recommended that you collect a lot of the information before so that you have it in one place, make a separate copy, a personal copy, which we've just done. And then we can see below for the flow of how to go through the BACT, and then we fill out the assessment. One thing that's really important here when filling out the assessment is to not leave any questions blank. in order for the results to be returned accurately and to get accurate results, you have to fill it out thoroughly. So we start with the about the enterprise. And maybe this will also connect to the question that came up by Malvern here about the definition of an enterprise. Here, there's no request for a registration number or for any sort of legal or formal document testifying that it is an actual enterprise. The information is very basic. You can fill in the name, the year that it was created. If it has a website, you can add the website link. I will increase the size just so it's a bit more visible. Specify the period that is being reported on. Then the size of the enterprise with assets, profit, net profit, the number of employees, full-time and part-time. And here, also, this might in part respond to the question that came up a bit earlier about possibly crossing some of the red lines and maybe using chemical fertilizers, for example. Here, the enterprise can specify what its vision is, what its mission statement or core objectives are, and maybe where it's trying to go to. So not necessarily just where operations stand today, but the direction that it is trying to move in, because that is equally important. Also, the key beneficiaries. So who are the customers or who are the people in society that are being targeted here, or what is the general benefit that is trying to create possibly for the environment. So that can be specified here, any certifications, listing the goods and services that it provides, where it is based, where are the places of operation, and then also where it falls within the value chain. So there were some questions that came up about the tool being usable for enterprises at different stages of the value chain. It is very much designed for that. Here, you see we have several different roles within the value chain, from agricultural production to processing, packaging, storage, and several more as well. And here you can list what the direct activities are based on what we just saw, those different roles, and who are the key groups that it is catering to: consumers, civil society, farmers, and what is the scale of operations. And you have some information over here to help you figure out what the scale is according to the tool. And then we also have what we call the enabling activities. So recognizing that an enterprise can do multiple things and can have its core operations, but then can also play other roles within the value chain and within food systems, which could be training and education provided maybe upstream to farmers, research and development, providing financing services, participating in policy processes and trying to advocate for policy change. All of these are also really important roles to play within a food system, and this tool allows for an enterprise to note these down. So maybe for the sake of the demonstration, we can imagine that the enterprise that is filling this out would be a fruit juice maker. So at the stage of processing, and we make various fruit juices. So here we can select food processing as the role, and the key group that it caters to are consumers. It also engages in its own packaging. So it also has packaging as a direct activity. And then in the enabling activities, we could say that in addition to producing juice and processing the fruit, it also engages directly with its suppliers, with specific farmers, and it provides training and education to them to help them meet certain production standards, certain environmental protection standards, and organizes trainings, possibly even provide some equipment to those farmers so that they produce very environmentally friendly juices. And that can be captured here as well. And you see that there are up to 5 different activities, either direct and enabling, that can be added in this about the enterprise sheet. So this is the very introductory one where you just fill in basic information about the enterprise. And then we come to what I consider the core of the B Act, which are the principal questions. So this might look familiar. This is the picture that we saw on the slide of the presentation. We have here in this column the principles. So we have recycling, input reduction, soil health, animal health, biodiversity, synergy, economic diversification, social values and diets, and so forth. So just by looking at these, I think you can tell that a lot of them relate directly to production. And we have over here in these two columns the question response fields for direct and for indirect. And again, these are really important concepts for the tool. When an enterprise is going to respond to a question that is under the direct column, that means that they perform that activity directly themselves. It is a part of their core operations. And then indirect would mean that they're not necessarily performing the activity themselves directly, but rather they can put in place incentives, or they can put in place support mechanisms to have other actors within the value chain perform those activities. And maybe going along with this example of being a fruit juice maker, we'll see what that could look like. So what I propose is that we maybe go through answering the questions for 3 different principles here to see what it would look like. Now, again, I just came up with the fruit juice maker. It's a fictional enterprise. It's not real. So this information is not extremely detailed, but for the sake of the demonstration, I think it will be useful to see how the tool is used. So we can start with the recycling principle. How would we respond to this? Do you substitute synthetic fertilizers with alternative soil inputs? As we are a fruit juice processor, we don't engage in agriculture directly. So that's when you would, with the direct question, you would select not applicable, NA. However, in the farmer training programs that we are providing to our suppliers, we are encouraging them to substitute synthetic fertilizers with locally available bio inputs or manure or other forms of organic fertilizers. And we're supporting them technically in doing this. So here we could select yes. Then the following question, do you make use of green manure, such as cover crops or other plants that decompose and enrich the soil? And you see here in the column in between the principle and the answer fields, we have examples. So this can also give some ideas about what this might look like in practice. And just on that note, if you look at the...
Hans?
Yes?
Hans, are you able to maximize your screen? I don't have a problem seeing it, but there
Sure.
are people who are saying that you can maximize it further.
Yes, absolutely. Is that better?
Yes, good. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully the text is legible and visible for everyone now. So here we have a question about green manure. Similarly to before, as a fruit juice maker, we don't do agriculture, so we select not applicable for the direct. However, we do have a farmer training program. We work with our suppliers. We want them to produce organic juices, and we want them to use other ways of enriching the soil. We might promote the use of cover crops and leguminous plants. So here we can then select yes. Then do you recycle wastewater for agricultural or other uses? So here we use a lot of water in the production process. However, we might not yet have gotten the equipment that helps us recycle that wastewater. We haven't set up a closed loop system in our fruit juice processing plant yet. So we indicate no, we'll be very honest, but we might have the intentions of doing so. For another question, do you use energy derived from biomass residues? Well, we are in a municipality where there is no access to biomass residues. So in this case, we could say either no, or we could say not applicable, depending on whether it's just simply not feasible where we are. And that's at the discretion of the user to determine. And I think this is an important principle. The tool is not supposed to punish for what we have not done or what we're not doing yet. It's really at the discretion of the user, whether that be the investor or the enterprise surveying themselves. to determine whether something is feasible or not. So those are some of the questions for the recycling principle. I propose that we have a look at another one of the principles. Let's go down and look for economic diversification. So here we have economic diversification principle with a few questions. Again, there are some examples next to the questions to help the user better understand what each question is asking for. And so the first question is, do you take steps to ensure greater systemic resilience of agroecosystems to extreme weather events or other disturbances? In terms of where we stand in the value chain, we don't do agriculture, so we cannot respond to that directly. We don't have any operations that directly relate to this, so we select not applicable. But for the indirect, we do work with suppliers who are doing agriculture, who have fruit orchards, and as a part of our farmer training programs, we might be supporting them to establish more climate resilient orchards. We might be supporting them to have windbreaks, to have better water retention on their land, to reduce runoff by setting up dikes, for example, and to better be able to withstand various extreme weather events. So let's say that's a part of our farmer training program, so we will select yes. For the next question, do you take steps to ensure greater livelihood resilience to stress and shocks, such as economic shocks, weather shocks, by offering diversified income, production, and access to the market? Here, this would directly apply, of course, to our own workers. Are we affording our own workers resilience vis-a-vis different economic shocks? Let's say that it's something that we are thinking very much about. If there is a drought in the region that we work in, or if there is another shock that makes it so we can't get the quantity or the type of fruits that we usually use, are we still able to provide employment for our workers? Let's say here that we are thinking actively about how to do so, but we haven't managed to do this yet. And then indirectly, are we doing this for our suppliers? And we could say here possibly yes, because we're encouraging our suppliers to have very diverse orchards or diverse farms, to not just grow maybe mangoes, but possibly also grow citrus fruit, and to grow papaya fruit, and to grow passion fruit. That way, if there's one of our products, one of our juices that for some reason we have an issue with, we sell less of, there's less of a market for it, there are other juices. So through economic diversification, we are supporting also our farmer suppliers. So those are some questions for the economic diversification. I hope that gives a bit of an idea of what the sort of this part of the tool looks like. And then lastly, we can go to one more principle before then turning to the results: fairness. Here, the first question is, do you work on increasing organizational capacities of farmer communities and other local food system actors? As we are not a producer, we put not applicable for ourselves, and in the scoring, that won't deduct any points. Indirectly, we do work with farming communities and other local food systems actors. So if we are involved in increasing organizational capacities, perhaps, we work specifically with a cooperative of farmers in a certain municipality, and we have provided different types of support to that cooperative, we could say that we are. This can also extend to other types of organizational capacity, whether it's advocacy related, training related, financially related. This is, of course, up to the interpretation and to be connected to the use case, the real case of the user. Maybe we'll take one more question before moving on to the results. One more question under fairness: does your enterprise hire rural youth, or does it support the creation of decent jobs for youth in the food and agriculture sector by actively participating in policymaking? So for us, we can say that we are based in a city, and we are not that close to the areas of production, although we're in the same municipality, but there might be some distance, so we could assess based on our geographic location whether this applies to us or not. we might select not applicable. However, maybe we know that the suppliers that we're working with have the opportunity to specifically make a point of hiring youth, rural youth, and maybe that's a requirement that we have, or maybe that this is something that we want to incentivize or to encourage. And in this case, we'll say we haven't yet done so, but we're thinking about how it is that we can encourage our suppliers to hire more rural youth. And it continues all the way through the 13 principles. So I hope this gives an idea of the types of questions that you encounter, how you respond to the questions, how you relate it to where you stand in the value chain directly, and also how an enterprise can influence other stages of the value chain through its indirect activities. Now we come to the screening questions, which we've brought up a couple times now. So here they are. If any of the red lines are crossed, you would just select it here, and then this will appear later in the scorecard. As it was pointed out in one of the comments, if you download this tool and you use it offline in Excel, unfortunately, these red lines will not be clickable. So this is one of the technical challenges that the tool currently has, technical limitations, better said. So as of now, it's still a web-based tool. So let's say that our enterprise does not cross any of these red lines. Now we move lastly to the impact questions. As we had mentioned, these impact questions collect quantitative information about the social, economic, and environmental impact, including carbon footprint, carbon sequestration, water use, soil health, biodiversity, number of jobs created, and so forward. So this information does not have to be provided. It's optional. Again, this will only appear in what we call the financier scorecard. So that's the most comprehensive sheet of results that this tool can generate. And we think that this information is often what impact investors are looking for. But for the use of enterprises and possibly for the use of certain accelerator programs, incubators, or other types of investors, donors, they might not request this information. But we added this sheet so you have the possibility of capturing it, and also a series of questions here to capture the positive systemic impact, so impact on the broader food system, also possible negative impacts on the system, and then the potential for expansion, so scaling up, scaling out, scaling deep. And you'll find across the tool that there are often definitions to help you understand what is meant by the different types of responses. There will also be a rubric at the bottom of the impact questions to help you understand which response might best apply to you or to your enterprise for each of the questions. And that's something I could have mentioned earlier. At the very end of this tool, you'll also find a glossary. And so this provides a bit of a conceptual definition of each of the principles, also some of these other areas that are being measured, to just help you be familiar with all of the different concepts that are coming up in the tool. So now to come to the scorecard, what you get once you've completed the tool. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see it a bit better here. Hopefully it's still big enough for all to see. Based on the responses that we provided, and again, I took some time beforehand to fill out all of the responses. You need to complete the tool thoroughly to get an accurate result. Our score comes out to about 69%. And I think it's really important that I mention here that this score shouldn't carry any judgment. And that's why we did not define a threshold at which point an enterprise is or is no longer agroecological. Really, it's for the use of the user, how the user wants to make use of it, to track continuous improvement, to pinpoint capacity gaps where support can be provided, or just amongst a pool of enterprises to compare and just to see which percentages, which scores are those that they want to pay most attention to. So this is the score, and also to say there is probably no enterprise that would get a perfect score. You know, there are always areas where improvement can be made, and it's a very, as you saw, extensive list of questions that try and capture plenty of different facets of agroecology. So if an enterprise ever somehow had 100%, I think we would have a lot that we could learn from them. But I doubt that we would find such an enterprise. And then below here we have the tree diagram. So again, the 3 operational principles for sustainable food systems, you can see, are represented here. And within each of those, we have the different agroecological principles. And so we'll get scores for each of those. And those will appear here. This is the tree diagram. And this is also a way of neatly visualizing the performance of an enterprise that can be used again for communications. And below we have a breakdown, which provides some of the same information, but in a different form. And it's visualized a bit differently here with the bars. So again, we have all of the principles. We have the different areas of sustainable food systems and our scores for each of those. And also, just to understand how certain scores were generated and what they represent, we have a column that informs the user of the percentage of questions that were responded not applicable. Because again, those get taken out of the equation that generates the percentages. And if it's of interest, you can also generate a visualization that looks like this at the end. So there's the possibility within the tool to download a diagram that looks just like this, that shows how you're doing in each of the 3 areas, and with all of the 13 different principles. So that's another way of visualizing the results that can be useful for communications and can be useful for the enterprises. And then, as we saw also in the presentation, we have a visualization of how much enterprises contribute to each of the SDGs. That's what this looks like based on the responses that we provided. And then suggestions for where agroecological improvement can be made based on the 3 principles that received the lowest scores. So here it's co-creation of knowledge, social values and diets, and biodiversity, with some pointers on maybe which direction we could go in to do this. Then based on the screening questions, no red flags, emerged here. And then based on the responses given in the impact questions, this is sort of the grade that we get on our potential to make systemic impact. It's positive, as you can see. In the middle would be neutral, and here we're more on the positive side. And again, this is not a numerical score because there's no exact science to this, but it's to say that there are indications that there is potential to make change at a broader food systems level. And here also potential for expanding impact. So what is the possibility for expanding this impact through a couple different means that are specified in the impact questions? And this is useful possibly for the investors on the financier side. They want to know that this can be scaled. And at the end, we have room for comments. And maybe I'll just close by coming back to this point on the possibility to specify, add comments throughout most of the tool. When we come back to the principal questions, let's see here. It wouldn't be here. At the end here in the scorecard is where comments can be provided that might want to contextualize some of the results. Maybe there were some pieces of information that were not captured that they want to specify here. So there's always the ability to bring in that extra contextual information to help the user or the person that will read the results better understand. So this was a quick demonstration, but I hope that it gives you a much clearer idea of how the tool looks, how it can be used in practice when you're sitting at a specific place within the value chain, whether that's at the production level or at the processing level or at another stage in the value chain, and that you now also can see the results that it generates, the visuals that can be used, and how it can also be used as a reference and as a tool for measuring improvement and making changes within the enterprise. So I think I'll stop here, Nancy, and open the floor for questions. I'll be very happy to, I'll stop sharing my screen, but we'll be very happy to reshare it and go back into the tool if anyone would like. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hans. That was an amazing demonstration of the tool, and probably transitioning from the presentation, it brings more ease and more understanding. I have two participants who have raised their hands, Gaylord and Chimera. So Gaylord, go ahead and ask your question, followed by Chimera. I think there's also a question in the chat by Kwaku. Kwaku is asking, can we visualize the environmental and carbon footprints for enterprise or project activities? Not sure what this implies, but it's okay, go ahead, because I saw some questions on carbon on the impact level, but it would be nice that you respond based on what he thinks. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Gaylord, and ask your question.
Thanks for that opportunity, and thanks, Han, for the great presentation. I hope I can be heard. I had a question initially when you are defining your enterprise. Something caught my attention, and that was about the scales. You were describing scales about consumers or scales about number of farms, and I thought the scales are quite big, the options given there. And the question is, can this tool be customized? For instance, when you talk about the number of consumers, you are giving an option of low if you're having 0 to 1,000 consumers. And I'm imagining of a case where you're having a scale where you want to define maybe 0 to 100 as being low, and then 100 to 500 as being medium, instead of sticking to these options that you given there. Is there an option for kind of contextualizing these scales? Thank you.
Okay. Can I pick the question from Chimera? Because if they're short questions, I can pick more. Chimera, go ahead and ask.
Thank you very much, Hans. And this is quite a rich presentation and a good tool. It takes me back to some part of my work I do on social responsibility, and the days back on with regards to global gap interpretation into local usage. The elements that you've brought in, even sustainability reporting. So I find it's a good mixed grill, and those that have applied, it brings them back. It's like retooling them to be able to link the dots. One of the principles and elements in all the other two is governance, where the leadership of an enterprise or a business need to buy in and be parts and parcel to endorse, and even their uptake to be in position to invest in aspects that bring about sustainability. And I think the same would apply for agroecology. So I've seen, maybe I missed out with regards to the variable of governance. I wanted you to explain a little bit more to it. What does it allude to vis-a-vis what is known in social responsibility for the buy-in of the leadership of an enterprise, and both in regards to global gap, like in Kenya, you have there is a Kenya gap. So and so forth with regards to sustainability aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Chimera. Hans, can you just answer the two questions, plus the third one that was on the chat before we progress?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for the really good questions. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Maybe in reverse order. On the question about governance and how similar it might be to how governance is defined and measured within the global gap or Kenya gap, the tool has some questions related to governance. As you saw, maybe I'll just share my screen once again to highlight these. Now, in this case, the governance is more about governance of land and natural resources. Okay, I think you can see my screen again. Let me just increase the size. Okay. So here we have land and natural resource governance. So do you contribute to the development of policies or public knowledge related to links between agroecology and global changes? Do you develop, inform, or encourage national level legislation, policies, and programs that reward or incentivize agroecological approaches? And do you proactively promote access to land for a range of stakeholders? So here, when we talk about governance, it's framed this way. What is the position of the enterprise regarding governance of land and natural resources? But then there are also some other questions, as you saw, that relate to employment practices. But I think maybe where there might be less of a focus, as there is in Global Gap, is internal governance of the enterprise itself. And what are the governance structures? What is the room for participation and decision making that is given to the different employers, actors within the value chain? Although there are some questions about participation that sort of touch on this as well, including, does your enterprise have policies put in place or incentives aimed at ensuring the equitable governance and traditional rights over natural resources? Do you engage in, here's maybe one that goes more in the direction that I was mentioning. Do you engage in multi-stakeholder, pre-competitive partnerships that help to mobilize and share knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources that support the uptake of agroecology? And the tool also looks to see whether the enterprise is involved in any way in policy processes, whether the enterprise actively informs public policy or informs or has company policies aimed at establishing a closer connection between producers and consumers that you would have in a short distribution network supply chain. So these are, I think, the elements that come close to governance, but I'm not very familiar, to be entirely honest, with all of the different aspects of Global Gap and Kenya Gap. So that's the best I can do to sort of try to shine some light on where the overlaps and similarities might be. But it would actually be very interesting to learn about what some of these other governance measures could be, and that we could learn from and might want to include at a later time in our tool. Then coming to the next question about can we visualize the environmental impact, such as the carbon footprint? There is a nicely laid out sheet that provides the information that is given in a nicely formatted way, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's actually a visualization. We haven't done this yet, and the reason why is because we understand that a lot of the users of the tool will probably be farm enterprises, will be at the smallholder level. And so we know that a lot of this information isn't regularly collected by farm enterprises, smallholder farmers, or cooperatives. And that's why that section of the tool is also optional. But if we see that there's a lot of demand in the future for having visualizations for that information, we can really look into doing that too. And then lastly, about contextualizing the scales, that is one of the things about the tool that is modifiable. So if you wanted to modify what high level or medium and low correspond to in terms of scales, you could absolutely do that. And I think those were all the questions. So Nancy, I turn back over to you.
Okay. I'll pick a question from Dinsa again. Dinsa, are you there? Can you ask your question?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Hans, again. I think I came back once again. First of all, I really enjoyed the way you have described all this, the forms that has to be filled. It's really, I mean, it really makes the proposal, whether it is really ecology sensitive or not. That is what I learned from that. But I think you brought back again the red line in these forms again. Suppose if somebody uses some of these red lines, example, I used fertilizer before. Is it a total cancellation of the proposal, or the rank or the rate will be reduced? This is one question. Second is about the readiness of the privates actually to involve in this, if you can comment on that. And third, I think more or less, if we are focusing on ecology, that our product is going to be an organic product finally. The market issue, how do you address for these small enterprises about the market issue? These are the questions. Thank you.
Hans, please go ahead and respond. I think that's the question we're just having. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming back, Dinsa, and I'm very glad that you found this presentation useful. So the way the agroecology score is generated, it is not affected by the red lines. So if you do cross one of those so-called red lines, it will appear at a different section in the scorecard, but the agroecology score won't be affected because that is based only on the principal questions. So we tried to make a sort of a separation of those things deliberately to show, where there is a lot of alignment. And then the red lines, again, that is for the user, whoever that is, to make a decision themselves about what they want to make with that information. And the tool also gives room to add contextual information so that you can explain maybe that, as you mentioned, we want to move towards more of an ecological model and we're transitioning, we're in this process. And then in terms of the other two questions, the market issue. So I think what this tool comes to do, it fills what we saw as an existing gap in the market, which is to connect enterprises that are aligned to various degrees with agroecology, that want to move towards more of an ecological model, but they are not being recognized for this because, again, the standard metric that investors almost always refer to is financial revenue, and that will stay, but we want them to consider these other dimensions, these other positive impacts that enterprises are having within broader food systems and within value chains. And so this tool helps to show to market actors that your enterprise is working in this direction. And we hope that it can really be useful then to build bridges between the investors and different financiers and donors and the enterprises. And then with market readiness. So I think, again, this tool can be used by anyone. It can be used by enterprises who are not yet market ready. It can be used by some who are still at the ideation stage and have an idea. And so they then want to fill out the tool based on what their idea is and see what results they get. Or it can be used by mature enterprises to see, what their performance has been over a recent period and decide after where they want to go based on that. So it's really usable at all stages and by everyone.
Okay. Thank you. There is some question from Kerubo asking if the information generated from this tool is usable, especially where a user is a researcher in assessing various agroecological enterprises. So I do believe that, Hans, this tool is based on robust also information that has been published on the agroecology principles. Those are really renowned. But I believe that some of the questions could be adjusted also based on what a researcher is looking for. But I'm happy to hear what you can advise the member about the use of the tool under research situations. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a group that I didn't mention, but another really interesting space where the tool can be used. To your point, Nancy, the questions can be modified as long as you think that the question still fits within a principle. Then you can modify it. You can rephrase it. You can make it maybe more focused. And absolutely, I think we, as of now, we're also welcoming civil society to make use of the tools just to have a better assessment and a better understanding of where a lot of enterprises stand, to identify maybe capacity gaps. And I think researchers could do similarly, or they could have their own objectives for using the tool. But in short, I think absolutely it can be used for research purposes too. And again, there's no copyright, so it's free to be used. However, if changes are made to the tool, we do request that somewhere a disclaimer is provided stating that this is a modified version of the original tool. An actual disclaimer statement an example disclaimer statement is provided in the manual on the website that we saw earlier.
Thank you. Hans, do you have any other presentation after this, or that was the end of your presentation?
That was the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, because I was just making sure that we're not taking a lot of time into the questions when there is another presentation. Is there anyone still having a question, a comment, a nice word to say? I will not force you to actually just ask a question, so you can also say something good. Giving two hands a chance, yeah, to just give a comment about this tool. You don't have to ask a question.
Hello, Nancy.
David Kabanda, yes, over to you. Are you speaking?
Yes. Good
Okay.
afternoon from Uganda, and I'm very happy to be on the call. Thank you so much, Hans. The presentations and the responses were spot on, and thank you so much for coming up with this tool. We already started using it, and it is exciting to also, gauge ourselves and then look at the percentages that it gave us. Of course, I'll not tell you now. But mine is just quickly simple. You talking about the copyright issue. Could we be safe if you could put like a signage? Do you use, for example, Creative Commons such that if someone sees that they take it that the material is open? That was the only thing that I wanted to mention.
Okay. David, thanks for the comment. I am sure Hans will give a final comment based on what you've asked. To the organizers, there has been a big request to ensure that we get information, we get our Francophone colleagues, we get them information in French. So I hope the recording can be able to give us a translation that will support the Francophones to understand it better. There is a comment that this is a great tool and members are willing to try it. So Hans, I think one of the questions more people are asking to be able to access the tool, and I'm just hoping that as we send out the recording, we are also able to share the tool again with members so that they are able to use the tool. One of the things that we're also appealing to all of you is that when you use the tool and you feel it could be adjusted or there is a question that could be adjusted in a way, kindly, we will be putting a contact email where you can always give your comments so that we continuously improve this tool and really to ensure that as many of us are able to use it. And I hope that, Hans, we shall have another meeting where we are actually reviewing how this tool has been used by different actors so that we really look at the use of the tool. So I want to call upon Hans to to give his final comments. And Faith, if you are there, I think you can also talk about if someone wants to join ISFA, how this is going to happen. Another appeal is that we run these dialogues on a monthly basis. And if you have a topic, you have a tool, you want to create greater awareness, an email will be dropped on how you can contact us. You don't have to be in Kenya, you can be in a different country, you're having an innovation you want to share, just reach out to our ISFA teams and we are able to support you in having a dialogue and having people listen to what you have in the field of agroecology. So hands over to you before I hand over to Faith or Anthony to give contacts on how they can be contacted on reaching out to ISFA or when someone has a topic here. Hans, any final comment?
Thank you. I just want to express on behalf of BioVision our gratitude to ISFA for giving us the opportunity to present the tool and to share it with a larger audience. It was really encouraging and really exciting to hear all the comments today and to see that like us, people view this tool as being useful and that they will make use of it. As Nancy mentioned, we are very happy to receive all of the feedback that we can so that we can in time make improvements if we need to, and information will be provided on how to reach us. But again, thank you very much to all of the participants today for your time, for the interesting questions and observations, and thank you so much to ISFA for giving us the chance to present the BAC tool at one of the dialogues.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hans. In the chat box, there is information on how you can register to become an ISFA member, but we also have a contact email where you can write an email to us to tell us if you have a topic and you want to make a presentation to create increased awareness. So Anthony, I'll give you a chance to actually talk about members joining ISFA and any other information to the platform here.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Hans, for the presentation. It was great, and thank you, members, for finding time to join the dialogue. As Nancy has said, that how to join ISFA. In the chat box, I shared a link, so you can use the link to join the ISFA. So in the link, you will either, if at individual level or at organization level, you will join, and there's a place where you will be required to answer a few questions and also join the thematic working groups so that you can participate in each one of them. So I think that's what I can say. The presentations and the recording will be shared shortly after the dialogue. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, members. We have just come to the end of our dialogue, and I've just realized most of you have held on for the longest, and we've not had so many drop-offs. So thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this. Kindly, we're going to share information. We are going to share the presentation so that you are able to use the tool, and please give us feedback about using the tool and what is emerging out of that. For those who want to join ISFA, the link is provided. If you have a topic that you want to present, kindly reach out to ISFA, the ISFA email, and copy it to Anthony so that we are able to slot you as part of our speakers during our dialogues. Thank you, and this actually marks the end of our dialogue today. Thank you so much. Asanteni sana.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.